Good morning and welcome to Ed's World, where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. I am your host, Jay Edgar, and I am blessed to be joined today by Libertarian Presidential candidate Keenan Wallace, rather. I can't talk this morning. Dunham. Keenan, welcome to Ed's World.
Thank you. Yeah, you got it right. Keenan Wallace Dunham.
Uh,
I'm running for president 2020 in the Libertarian Party.
yeah, that's going to make for a very good conversation when I get down to the part of the itinerary where I have you tell us about yourself. I've got a feeling there's a great backstory behind that.
Mhm.
Before we get started today, I just want to talk about a little bit that I saw this morning. Right before we recorded this episode on Monday morning, I did an episode of The Deplorable Batcave, and we were talking about the fact that the Trump body count meme was starting to run around just the same way that the Clinton body count one was. So, our fearless host talked about an image that he brought up, and I'm going to put that on the screen, and it's showing the amount of times that Clinton body count hit across the country versus the amount of times and where they hit for Trump body count across the country. And as we can see from the diagram, the Clinton body count meme has hit all over the place, all over the country, and it's just spiked. And the Trump body count has kind of fell flat, and it seems to only be coming from California. So it really looks like on this Epstein thing we're going to talk about in a little bit here that they're trying to push a narrative and it's not really working out for them. A couple of announcements. Well, I don't really have any announcements here. I'm still plugging along on doing my civics review, but I had something change in my personal life, so I'm going to be able to dedicate a lot more time to working on my channel, trying to get up to live stream point, and trying to just make this a better channel for people. We have a full show going on today. We're going to be talking, of course, about the Epstein case and the fact that somehow he apparently killed himself in his cell while he was supposedly on suicide watch. We had some shootings about a week ago at this point. We talked a bit
Mhm.
about them on this show last week, but they were still fresh. Now that we've had some time to analyze what's all happened with those, we're going to be talking a bit more about that this week. The Democrat Party has pushed an impeachment hearing to the floor so they can start debating whether or not they can impeach. We'll talk about what's going on with that. As we always do on this show, we'll be talking about 2020, and our guest today is involved with 2020, so we'll get some good insights as to what's going on with the Democrat Party there and the process that they're going to have to go through. Protesters gathered outside Mitch McConnell's house in the wake of all of these shootings. We're going to talk a bit about what went on there and why this is such a dangerous uh, event that's going on there. And finally, we'll be talking about the ICE raids down in Mississippi and the fact that the Hunt movie got pulled. It is going to be all of this and more over on Ed's World. Thank you for subscribing and liking this video over on YouTube and BitChute. Remember, every time you like one of these videos, it tells YouTube what people should be watching, and it really helps our channels grow. Thanks for listening back to this on the audio platforms. We are on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And remember, if you are over on iTunes, please hit that 5-star rating and a good review. That also helps us move up the algorithms and grow our show. Ed's World is proudly partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group. Freedom Scoop is holding open casting for writers. If you have any interest in writing or know somebody who does, please get in contact with me. I will get a sample article out there and we will see if we can work together. After a lengthy introduction and monologue, it's time to talk about the most important part of Ed's World. So Keenan, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I ran for president in 2016 in the Libertarian Party, and I went to the national convention, and I obviously didn't get nominated. Gary Johnson got nominated. I endorsed him after he got nominated as the endorsed candidate for the party, and I plan on running again this 2020 election for president as a libertarian candidate who embraces small government, fiscal responsibility, more civil liberties, and also have a great industrial plan for legalizing a few industries that would just explode our economy.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, the four that I want to legalize and change regulation in the country for the better is to legalize gambling 100%, but also let states and localities decide if they want casinos in their local areas. So there's still states' rights with it that I'm planning, and then legalize cannabis, medical and recreational, 100% federally. And there could be some local laws that determine. I know obviously there's going to be an over 21 law for it, so it'll be regulated and become like alcohol. And then, well, that one's probably the most important issue because of the medical aspect. I don't see why it's not gone to the Supreme Court already for medical usage for anybody in any state. I live in South Carolina, and I think you should have medical use here. I don't see how they're barring anyone from medical use. They couldn't stop CBD, and now that's in South Carolina. And then legalize blockchain, Bitcoin, and cryptocurrencies and regulate them. And then my last one is to eliminate the personal income tax for a 9% sales tax, national VAT tax.
So what's the difference between sales tax and VAT tax? Because I'm not 100% sure I know. Well, I know what the difference is, but I'm kind of curious as to how they're interchangeable.
It's a VAT tax is more descriptive. A VAT tax is a 9% at the POS tax, whereas a sales tax can be different at different times. It could be taken at different times. It could be like the so-called flat, or no, this is the fair tax, the quote unquote fair tax, has a lot of other fees that occur at different times. And that was also a 21% sales tax included. So mine is just a flat VAT of 9% and no other fees, whereas there were other auto purchase fees and different types of taxes that went along with the fair tax. So VAT would be more descriptive. It's just a 9% VAT, which is at the POS.
Well, one of the most fun things that I like to ask people when they get over onto the left side of my screen is how they got into what brought them to my attention, which in your case would be running for president. So how did you decide that you wanted to be president under a libertarian ticket?
A number of years ago, basically, I became a libertarian because of Ron Paul. And in 2012, I was watching his campaign, and he didn't go all the way, but his was the most revolutionary in that he was staying on point about getting out of wars for oil. And I am a big proponent of freeing whistleblowers, stopping political targeting, freeing Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, Ross Ulbricht, Jeremy Hammond, and others, and pardoning Edward Snowden. So I've been involved in activism regarding that. When Chelsea Manning was freed at the very end of Obama's administration, I was making phone calls and writing letters, and that was awesome that she got pardoned or sentence commuted at the end of the administration. So I've been an activist for a number of years, and that's what my goals are.
All right. Well, I do wish you the best going forward into 2020. I'm sure that we do need to have a little bit more shakeup in the two-party system, and we'll be talking a little bit about a little bit of the corruption that comes out of the two-party system later on in the show. Got my misgivings about our current president right now, and I'm mostly a supporter of him, but before we get into that part of that, let's talk about Epstein. So this is the event that changed the whole course of this show, because I had a completely different show written before all of this happened. On Saturday morning, guards came in to find an unresponsive Jeffrey Epstein. For those who don't already know, and that's going to be very few people who would watch this show, Jeffrey Epstein is the proprietor of the Lolita Express, who was flying prominent figures of both political and non-political variety out to an island to have sex with underage girls. Allegedly. So, he has a lot of dirt on a lot of people, allegedly again, and all of a sudden he was found after being under suicide watch for a previous attempt to be unresponsive in his cell. Medical examiner pronounced him dead, and now the memes are flying around, as we saw just a little bit before, as to who's responsible for it. But the biggest consensus that we all have across this country, it's the thing we've been most united about in this country for a very long time, is the fact that this was probably not a suicide. What have you seen on this so far?
Yeah, I don't have any personal evidence, but obviously the first attempt was said it could have been an assault at the same time, and they didn't determine it immediately whether it was a suicide attempt. So was this a second assault? I don't know. I can't say. But the repercussions, I've read the testimony and the cases of the other allegations for his first guilty verdict, and also lawsuits between the so-called madam, that he had, and other plaintiffs and defendants that have sued each other back and forth. And there are some powerful people named in those, and it doesn't have to rely on Jeff Epstein's information. It can rely on the witnesses' information who brought up those other claims. Mm-hmm. And some of those people are inside jurisdiction and also statute of limitations to go to jail still.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's going to be ongoing investigations, and I hope that our Attorney General that we have now is someone who investigate any person and not leave anybody untouchable, like we know that Bill Clinton may have been untouchable during previous administration.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing with Bill Barr is just that I was a little bit on the fence with him over the past few things, but I mean, the fact that he is pulling on this and pushing on it so hard kind of puts him back in my radar as somebody that's going to be okay with this. So, I mean, I look forward to seeing what he finds out about this, if he manages to find anything out about this. But, I mean,
well, he doesn't really have to lift a finger. If he doesn't do anything, then he'll still be allowing an investigation to happen. But as soon as you're investigating a past president, he probably needs to be involved to appoint a special counsel, I would think.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that would be a special counsel thing.
Yes, I believe you are correct on that because of, well, it would depend on if the former president did something outside of office, because the only real standing that president has is that he can't be indicted on something while he's in office. So,
right.
I mean, if he does something afterwards, it's on him. And I'm sure the old Energizer Bunny out there is didn't keep it in his pants after he was out of office.
Was there some kind of connection with the Obama administration then? And then you'd have to appoint a special counsel if you have any information like that. If they come up with something like that, and people have put it out there that there are plenty of people who can go to jail, and then how this interacts with the 2016 election, I don't really know. But with Jeff Epstein dead, there's things we're never going to know. Mm-hmm. So you just got to think this was going on. These accusations were going on in 2016 during the election. They were brought up against Hillary Clinton. So, the repercussions there, it's going to have a domino effect, and there may be other things going on. So,
well, yeah,
we'll never know.
I know the Epstein thing, that was a big thing that was going on through the 2016 election. I mean, I was still listening to the Hannity podcast at the time while we were going through the election, and it seemed like every day he was bringing up the Lolita Express. He never said Epstein expressly, but he was talking about that constantly. It was almost a part of his daily monologue.
Right.
So this isn't something new.
Yeah, it was part of the trash that they were trying to dig up against Hillary Clinton. And without any direct testimony from Epstein, we'll never know all of the contacts, all of the people. It's not that he would ever divulge it anyway. He may have lied. He may have never given that information up. But now we for sure not going to know everything.
I want to talk a bit about the timing of this entire situation. One of the things that I noticed while we were going through all of this is the first thing that a lot of people try to accuse, and we'll talk about this in just a moment as well, is that the shootings that happened in Dayton and El Paso were orchestrated to try and cover up the fact that the documents that Epstein had were about to be released. And then we had these documents that were released, and all of a sudden now Epstein is dead. And everyone's theorizing the fact that it wasn't cell phone. that it was somebody, a powerful player, as you may, as you would see.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't make any announcement or say anything that I don't have direct evidence for. Just I can come up to the same conclusions anybody else can. Something shady's going on. I don't know if there's any connection to the shootings. It could disturb someone and they go out and perform a shooting. It doesn't have to be directly connected. News. Some kind of news story like this, you never know, and that they're just mentally deranged. I don't really draw any connection there, but it's sad. It's sad that happened.
Well, it is sad. I don't
Not
wish the
Epstein.
worst
I
on
don't know.
anybody.
I don't know if I'm talking about Epstein. Really, I'm talking about the shootings.
Well, as far as Epstein, I mean, I wouldn't wish death on anybody. That's a
Right.
horrible thing, especially by doing that. But I mean, you got
Right.
to admit, I mean, if you look at the document I sent you, I have the picture up in there because I don't have video
Mm-hmm.
share. But we get memes like the classic one that's
Mm-hmm.
up on the screen. I had information that would have led to the arrest and conviction of the Clintons. No,
Mm-hmm.
seriously, I actually did.
Right.
So we'll get to see many, many more things about that. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can accept the fact that he might have been done in by somebody else and it might not have been a suicide and not have the Clintons involved in it either. I mean, kitty diddlers do not fare well in prison.
Exactly. Yeah, that could have been an issue as well. Yeah.
That's something that we all know fairly well,
Mm-hmm.
even without going and watching prison specials.
Right.
Basically, if you've touched a child, you have a target on your back.
Yeah. How long would he have survived? Nobody really knows.
Or, even make it into the general population.
Right.
His cellmate was removed immediately prior to all of this happening. And again,
Right.
the cameras came off, which means somebody on the inside probably knew what was going on. And
Mm-hmm.
he was just taken off suicide watch and the guards were
Mhm.
overworked. And there were so many things that had to happen perfectly
Right.
in order to do this. And I don't know. I don't think he did it himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That
And is there information that we're never going to learn because of that? Definitely.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he had a lot of information. So he had a lot of names. And we'll see if anybody else gets prosecuted. That'll be the key right there. If anybody else ever gets prosecuted, then if no one else gets prosecuted, that's definitely a big sign that something bad happened because of his death. I mean, if nobody else ever gets prosecuted because of his ring, if they just try to put it all under the rug, that's not right, I don't think.
I think we should petition Barr to sign a FOIA act over this, to be completely honest.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great idea. Yeah.
I mean, if we did the FOIA act and it got published in a book, how fast do you think
Right.
that would be a bestseller?
Right. I mean, there's already a lot of documentation. I was looking at a full court proceeding for one of the civil suits that also had a lot of the information from other court cases in it. And yeah, those names are there and they've been accused in public.
Mm-hmm.
Like Prince Andrew, I'll say right now, he was one of the names that was on there, and Bill Clinton was mentioned in the suits. So if there's people coming forward and saying, young women coming forward and saying that they were raped, then they need to be listened to. And, there needs to be an investigation of those parties named.
Well, and that brings up the interesting point, too, because, I mean, a lot of the people that are implicated are very powerful and,
Yeah.
even, I don't want to say left-wing figures, but let's say right-thinking figures.
Mhm.
I think that's politically correct enough. Do we continue down the road of believe all women at that point, or does that go out the window because of the people that are implicated?
I mean, their testimony was very specific, and like Dershowitz, for example, it was a little bit sickening that his services were paid in prostitution, with these young girls. That's totally not right,
Do people go to prison over this? Yes or no?
Epstein has, and I have no idea. It will take someone doing an investigation. I don't know if those are going on right now. I hope they are.
Mm-hmm. That's been my big takeaway as I've been listening to all of this is, are people actually going to be held accountable for
Right.
what happens, or is this all just going to disappear because Epstein died?
Right.
Or it gets buried
Yeah.
by some other part of the news because we are going into a busy news cycle.
Exactly. There are a lot of distractions, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that's the end of it or not. I hope it's not the end of it as far as prosecutions go.
Absolutely. Well, with that in mind, we talked a bit already about the shootings that went on and how people are thinking that these were distractions from the fact that this document was going to get dumped out there. But let's talk a little bit more about these shootings. Now, to catch everybody back up to speed, last week on Saturday, there was a shooting in El Paso in a Walmart where Patrick Crusius went in and he had a high capacity, high powered rifle and he just started indiscriminately shooting. He drove an hour and a half to get to the Walmart because it was in a city that was most population dense of Hispanics. He put a manifesto out. I don't necessarily know if it was actually his manifesto or if it was something that was provided anonymously on 8chan, but right now we're looking at the fact that he was a white supremacist style shooter.
Mm.
And then over in Dayton, Connor Betts went into a bar that he had previously been patronizing with a large amount of rifles, body armor, eye protection, and ear protection, and started shooting, but being so close to bar time, that was broken up pretty quickly. What have you learned about these shootings ever since we saw everything go down last week, now that some of the information is starting to be released?
I don't have any information that would connect it as far as the timing goes.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're both disturbed individuals, and we need to have better mental health services and some kind of check it, for something like this occurring. Obviously, there are. I mean, Dylan Roof was close to being stopped. If the current regulations on him possessing a handgun had been enforced, he wouldn't have had a handgun.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what these guys' prior histories were, what their legality status was for having handguns or any kind of gun, but they shouldn't have. So you can look at their case and say, well, red flags should have come up at some point. Did they ever come up? And it's got to be analyzed now, if they ever went on a red flag, and then why weren't steps taken to keep them from having guns?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the red flag because I know I'm going to want to talk about that a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to take some of the focus off Crusius because he is currently in a position where he's being questioned,
Mm-hmm.
and we are probably, again, barring some major distraction in the news cycle, going to get some answers as to what happened with Crusius, why he did it, and he's going to be held accountable. But I want to talk a little bit more about Connor Betts because he's never going to be held accountable for his crimes based on the fact that he was killed by a police officer in the midst of the shooting. But I mentioned in my solo video last week that I don't necessarily believe that this was politically motivated. I know a lot of people on the right try to point to the fact that Connor was a very, very active left-winger. He may have had ties to Antifa. He liked to retweet Elizabeth Warren. He liked to retweet Bernie Sanders, and he liked to retweet Jared Holt. But when I look at the evidence that's put out in front of us, I don't see somebody that went out and did this for a political purpose. I look at some of this more, and I've known some people like this. Somebody who's adamantly left-wing because he was bullied, and he thinks that the governing figure, whether it be like a principal or the government or anything like that, needs to step down and make things fair. But still, this person goes out and collects a large amount of guns. I've worked with a couple of people like this. And I think, he was just in a bar. I don't know what the relationship was with him and his sister's boyfriend, if maybe he was involved with this, because both of them were targeted in the shooting. But I'm guessing some white frat boys were just pushing him around because he was a weird kid, and he snapped and he went and he got his guns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be a personal issue. It could be a one-on-one, squabble that he had with somebody. But as far as red flags go, that's what we need to do, is analyze situations that have happened in the past like this. And I don't think that police should be able to issue red flags.
Oh, absolutely not.
They're not trained, and there's been a big hullabaloo about that in many states where sheriffs have said they're not going to go by that kind of red flag. Uh, so I'm pro Second Amendment strongly, and I don't mind there being a red flag on somebody who's been hospitalized and been actually seen by a professional in medical and in mental health. So that needs to be regulated the correct way. It should not be blanket allowed by the police to be put under a red flag based on an accusation, so that they're arrested for something and then they're put on a red flag. They're not convicted, that kind of situation. So yeah, there could have been something that stopped these, and we just need to look at all the details.
Well, and it's the same argument that we had at Parkland when we talked about that last year.
Mhm.
That kid in Parkland should have never had guns, and
Right.
the cops were repeatedly called to his house because he was torturing animals, and
Right.
he was a problem,
Hmm.
and nobody did anything about that. So,
Now, should the police be able to call in a professional, or if he's convicted of something, make that part of his probation? Yes.
yeah.
Okay. And do all judges do that? No. So maybe we should come up with a blanket regulation where violent crimes. Okay. I mean, this is an abusive person to animals or something. If they're doing violent crimes and they are suspected of having a psychological basis for those violent crimes, then maybe they should be evaluated, and that should be part of criminal investigations.
Well, yeah, I completely agree. The kid in Parkland should have been dragged before a grand jury and had an indictment brought against him.
Hmm.
Had the chance to argue his case in court and be convicted.
Right.
That would have taken everything out of his hands, except the cops came in, they reported it to the FBI, and it all went away.
Right. Yeah.
And this kid in Dayton had kill lists and he had rape lists. So somebody had to be
Hmm.
watching this kid too.
Hmm.
Of course, he didn't act on anything, and there's freedom of speech involved in there, and I don't think he should have been indicted. But somebody should have been watching out for something like this.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things that I want to bring up when I talk about this, and I'm going to fall into the typical right-wing cliche that the left has, and there was the shooting that was in Chicago that same weekend, and there have been a couple since then, and you know, when you look on Twitter and you try to bring that up, somebody on the left will go in and say, "Oh, conservatives are so predictable. What about Chicago?"
Mm.
But the reality is you don't call it a mass shooting when 40 people get shot in Chicago. You call that a Tuesday.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a terrible thing. Like, also, areas like that need better education and more opportunities. And people don't have opportunities, and they resort to drugs and gangs.
Mm-hmm.
So, does it get enough attention? No. So, we need to have better technical schools in Chicago. Technical schools in the Chicago city area, urban area would be great as an answer for socioeconomic problems there.
Absolutely. And as much as Chicago depends on the government, there are tons of government jobs in Chicago for people to take if they have the technical education.
Right. And if they don't have the education, they're not going to be able to take advantage of that.
And you can even put some competition in there and maybe drive some of the wages up.
Yep, absolutely. Skilled workers drive wages up, so.
Absolutely. Excuse me. I want to talk a little bit about the red flag laws that we're hearing about now because, you're in a position where you want to go and get into the government. So our illustrious president has come out and said that he is in favor of signing legislation on a federal level red flag law, which that's a big no-no all by itself. Not only for his base, but just on the fact that, he's such a constitutionalist otherwise. He wants to have the constitutionalist justices, but then he wants to turn around and sign something that slaps in the face of the Second Amendment. I'm not opposed to red flag laws. I just don't. The Second Amendment says the federal government shall not infringe on anything. It says nothing about the states. I know some states have things adopted into their constitutions that also carry the Second Amendment and carry it even further, but if there's going to be any regulation on something, I want it to be at the state level. Therefore, if I don't agree with it, I can go to another state.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason we have states.
Yeah. I would have to see what they're going to propose, and I think well, instead of a red flag law, I mean, it can be, just a rule on or advisement on how to start an investigation into someone who could get a red flag, and maybe some funding, and not an actual procedure to take away somebody's guns. Leave that to the states.
And I forget who I was listening to when I was talking about it, but I mean, red flag laws are dangerous on themselves. I mean, they give anybody the opportunity to go through and, try and file a red flag claim and get somebody's guns taken away without due process.
Right.
So one of the things that we do need to keep in mind when we're proposing all of these legislations is we have to have punitive measures in place to keep people from filing frivolous claims just for the political agenda. We also have to have other regulations in place to keep judges from following through to carry out a political agenda.
Right, absolutely.
That's the thing that most people are worried about, too. I mean, one of the other things, instead of having red flag laws, let's just enforce the laws on the books, like we talked about with the kid in Parkland.
Yeah.
Enforce what's going on already, and some of these people aren't going to have access to the weaponry, or at least legally.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be the case most of those times.
A couple of the other things that I want to bring up while we're talking about this, because this has started a national conversation and has started some other news events that I think maybe need to be talked about. There was a case in Kansas where I think it was a 22-year-old was open carrying a large rifle. He was switching back and forth between having it slinged and having it brandished. And I believe he was wearing some sort of combat armor while he was going through and just walking peacefully around a Walmart. The proprietor of the Walmart pulled the fire alarm and got people out of there. And the kid that was doing so, when he was apprehended and questioned about it, said that it was a Second Amendment audit, meaning he was testing his ability to open carry in the state where he is allowed to open carry in. What do you see there? What do you think when you see something like that?
It's private property, so they can set their own boundaries on your open carry.
Mm-hmm.
So they could say no guns inside the store, and if he's open carrying in the store, he's going to have to turn around if security tells him to turn around.
Yeah, I never thought about that either when I brought into that. That is correct. That's, stores can set. I don't know if that store was marked as a no weapons on premises, though. I'm guaranteed right now it is, but
if somebody spoke to him,
yeah.
And or if they told him to put it away, then he has to listen to that in private property. Yeah.
I just think it was something irresponsible that he was doing too, because I mean, you're trying to push this narrative down the throat of people who are going to panic, especially after we see something like this shooting in yet another Walmart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was definitely trespassing, so he's going to get something,
And just being genuinely stupid at that point,
too. Yeah, definitely. He could have got himself killed easily.
Well, I've got that in the bag, I think, unless you have anything else to add.
Okay, awesome.
Let's
No.
Go ahead.
No, that was awesome.
Let's go ahead and talk about, since the president seems like he's going to jump up and do something that the Democrats like, let's talk about the fact that they're still trying to get him forced out of office. At this point, I believe it was on Thursday, the Democrats pushed another vote through the House to bring impeachment to the floor to start getting debated. This measure actually passed, in spite of the fact that it's failed 3 times prior already to this point. But yes, now the Democrats are going to get this down to the floor and start talking about that. The vote to actually have the articles of impeachment read is slated to be sometime in December, but I have yet to see what crime they want to bring forward to try and push the impeachment agenda. What have you seen on this so far?
I don't see any crime that he's committed, and I don't see any impeachable offense. And they're basically doing it because they have the numbers in Congress. It's not going to pass the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gesture only, and it's to look good in the presidential election. Basically, it's to be talking about it in front of the camera. It's to get camera time, and I think they're wasting our time when they could go after Trump for things that he's done wrong, actual problems he's had during his presidency, and not something that's just carry over from the last election, which if that's all their grievance is, then they need to just face the next election and try to win the next election and not go through this process, which is a waste of time.
And that's exactly it. I mean, we're getting to that point of no return on the presidency. Now, they're going to file the articles if they get the debate passed through the House of Representatives, which means they're going to go on with another investigation. I think they're thinking the fact that they've already had one investigation and they can fast track it, but they're going to go through another impeachment investigation, and they have to. Does that get done before November?
This November? No, probably not.
Well, they're not going to vote on it until December. I'm talking November 2020.
No. No, that can be prolonged by the Republicans just to
Well, that's true too.
push it aside. Yeah. They can make it a non-issue easily too.
So at that point, you're having a symbolic impeachment investigation after you had a 3-year investigation that turned nothing up at the taxpayer's dime. And what is that going to look like going into an election year for people who are desperate to try to win the presidency back?
They're not focusing on anything that Trump is doing wrong, which I want to focus and debate him without mudslinging on exact things that he's done wrong, which are keep us in other countries. We're still police of the world. He wants to get us out of Afghanistan. It's only been 20 years that we've been there, almost. So we need to get out of Afghanistan. We need to stop punishing whistleblowers, which he's still doing. He's still allowing that to happen. Julian Assange helped him get information that helped him during the campaign, and he turned his back on Julian Assange. He was all for the freedom of speech for some of these individuals then, but he wasn't for it after he was in the presidency. So I think that's disingenuous. There's other issues like legalizing cannabis. He's not doing that where I would do that. And I have a technological plan that would produce more new tech jobs and also the gambling industry than just what he's doing right now. And I see if you went through everything, and I'm talking about an economic explosion in the United States, and we don't have to be stifled. And we don't have to just rely on tariffs. We can give some actual full goals and directions for the United States with new industries.
And I like that you keep bringing back the technology aspect, because, I mean, it might be time to pass the torch to some of these younger candidates. I mean, we'll talk about it when we talk 2020 watch in a little bit here, but I'm not impressed by the candidates that come forward, and I don't want to see any of them as president. But I'm glad to the fact that we're starting to get some Gen X and millennials in there that are interested in doing that, because, I mean, you have a technology plan going forward. Our current president, the only technology he really knows about is his smartphone because it has access to his Twitter.
Right. Yeah, he's just in the mentality of, and one part of it is good, at least he's looking at energy independence, whereas we should rely on our oil. Right. And, but not just rely on oil forever. What does he know about green energy? What does he know about what is good in green energy and how the free market should operate? Not much. And on the other side, I don't take it to the full socialist extreme of the Green New Deal. I just want a free market for all energy. So end all energy subsidies, both oil and for green energy, and also allow them all to compete equally. And you'll see an energy explosion, and the country will get independent very easily with a free market, and everybody will be profiting from the free market as well.
I want to bring this back over to the impeachment for a sec. I know we kind of fell off into the
Yeah,
reeds.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I always say it's all this and more, so I want the discussion out there. But one of the things that's always bothered me about this presidency and the fact that they've been so hell bent on impeachment from the beginning and trying to get him out of office. I know a lot of people on the right like to mock the left for saying that they'll impeach Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton will become the president. No, that's not true.
Right. Yeah.
They'll get Mike Pence as the president, but Mike Pence is an inside player. He's somebody who's been in government forever. One of the biggest problems that I feel like the Democrats have right now in going to this is the fact that somebody from the outside made it to the presidency on what was essentially his first try. And that's
Right.
never supposed to happen. This is supposed to be a lifelong career ambition for people
Right.
to go through the government, to get trained and groomed by the government, like Pence did for to an extent, and then ascend to the top.
Right. No, an impeachment's not going to happen. It won't go through because the Senate can block it easily right now. The Republicans still have numbers in the Senate, so that's not going to happen in the next 2 years. And if this is what they want to do, they want to 2 years then and have 25 candidates. It's going to be a waste of their time. That's not my strategy, so I can't really endorse the strategy.
And like you said, I mean, there's stuff that's gone on while he's been in office that they could
Right.
focus on and possibly, I don't think it would pass the Senate anyway, but they could possibly use
Right.
that as something that they could go for instead of going through the election that they wanted never to happen over and over and over again.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like Bears fans. I know you said that you had a little bit of background in
Right.
Chicago, but I mean, what's the difference between Marty McFly and Bears fan?
Mhm.
Do you know the
What's
answer to
that?
that one? Eventually, Marty McFly stopped going back to 1985.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's the same thing with the impeachment and over the 2016 election effort that we keep seeing over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got so much going on in the present, and they keep going back to the same thing.
Yeah, and they'll get hung up on that in the election this time. So, I think that's the mantra and the strategy of the Democrats is to whine. They basically want to whine, forever, inevitably, and indefinitely whine. So, if they're not in the presidency, is that what they're going to do whenever they're not president? Is whine? No, I guess so.
Well, we have talked an awful lot about the 25 people that are running for the presidency right now in this impeachment discussion. We've been having some great segues this show. I'm kind of proud of that. But now that we've talked about the fact that they want to get the current sitting president out there, let's talk a little bit about the 25 people who might vie to become the next president of the United States. So, first things first, we are to a point, we were a little bit early when I talked to Tim last week about we were a little bit early on polls. We couldn't really see what the polling had been doing by that point last week. Now we're to a point where RCP is starting to get some aggregates out, and we're starting to see some new polls come out, and we're starting to see how people shook out after the last debate, including where Tulsi Gabbard decided to slap Kamala Harris around, and her numbers are starting to show for it. So, what do you see from the patterns from the polls going on now?
I think they're wasting their energy. They've got their base paying attention, but they're splitting their base between 25 people. And it's not the year or the time for the primaries yet. So it's all about the first primary. It all comes down to, I believe, Iowa's, I think, first for Democrats. Whichever the first primary is, whoever wins that is going to have the most energy going forward. And right now they're basically chopping each other's donations in 25 parts and airtime, and no one's becoming more not mainstream media, but as far as name recognition, no one's becoming more name recognition than Trump divided by 25 candidates. So whatever they're doing, it's not helping them in the long run right now.
Oh, that's a hot take. The fact that they're wasting their time now, and it's an interesting idea. But I mean, the polls have been going on RCP as to who's going to be the next Democrat nominee since January of 2017.
Right.
So, yeah, that is definitely a hot take. It's interesting to bring up because they've been talking about this for 3 years, and now they actually have people going forward. And yeah, they are splitting that vote. There is a civil war in the Democrat Party. You can see it.
I think it's a Clinton power vacuum. It would be de facto Clinton, or if there was an Obama in there, it would be an Obama, and there's not. So it's a power vacuum that they're competing for, and even the fresh new people are competing for it easily.
Do you think Hillary or Michelle will pop in yet?
No, it doesn't look like it. No, I think it's too late now. I was wondering if maybe Oprah would run, but I don't think she's going to run.
Oprah would be an interesting one to run because everyone would expect her to run as a socialist Democrat because that's what's popular right now. But given the fact that she built her empire by herself through free market capitalism and being a capitalist and telling people what they wanted to hear so they'd go and buy her stuff, I can't see her being a socialist. I mean, people cite the fact that, oh, well, she gave cars away. Well, she gave cars away with her own money.
I was just thinking it would be name recognition that she would have a great edge.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what her political beliefs were, and she's told people in interviews she doesn't have a political life, she doesn't want one. So I don't think that's going to happen.
She would be excoriated too because she's not going to be the candidate that they want her to be.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of pressure, and she probably didn't want that pressure.
Well, let's circle back to the shooting here because we have some 2020 news that came along there, and that's because Beto O'Rourke, Cory Booker, and Elizabeth Warren, who are all still somehow in, have all now taken to the fact that they are calling the president a white supremacist. In fact, in spite of the fact that in the manifesto, Crusius said that his ideas long predated Trump, they're saying that Trump went out and personally radicalized Crusius to go out and shoot up this Walmart. Warren actually was she cited herself as saying somebody walked up to her and asked if the president was a white supremacist, and she said yes.
I saw that, yeah. I don't think that's helpful. I mean, was he a white supremacist? Yes. Do we need a dialogue about that? Yes. But is the immediate name calling without any evidence, that's just mudslinging. That's not productive, and it cripples our ability to work together with mutual respect to accomplish something. So how is she, as a current senator, going to work with Trump she's not going to be able to come up with any good idea for compromise that way.
Well, she can't go back and work with Trump anyway because she'll go back to Massachusetts and get nailed to a cross over that by her base, which is dwindling. From what I understand from Massachusetts, her base is dwindling by the day. I used to live over there. I know some people over there still.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't necessarily know why she's still in, but I do see that she does still have a following anyway.
Well, she'll, someone like that will stay in as long as they can pay for it. And if they can't pay for the daily operations, if they overexceed, then they'll drop out. So,
what about the moving of the goalpost? I want to talk about that for a second because for 3 years and even further beyond that, it was racist, racist, racist. I mean, there are people out there that said that the R for Republican stood for racist when people only just had the R next to their name. And we've all heard racist, racist, racist. Now it's white supremacist. So racist isn't good enough anymore because they've beaten the word to death and they've taken the meaning away from it. And I mean, what's the next step after white supremacist after they beat that to death?
Yeah, it's mudslinging, shock value. This kind of strategy is a strategy in politics to um, to negate and marginalize your opponent, to throw everything and see what sticks. And they want to also find out what draws an emotional reaction. So that draws an emotional reaction from their base. So they'll say it all day. Or at least this is not my strategy, something I endorse, but this is what the Democrats seem to do is they'll throw mud at something, see what sticks, and then they'll just keep throwing whatever stuck over and over. And that's not something I'm impressed by or think is productive at all. I would work with Trump. If he was on the other side of the aisle and he was somehow a senator, or I was a senator, I would work with whoever's in office to accomplish mutual goals, and we can all find some kind of mutual goal as Americans together. That's my take on it.
Well, and I think social media has kind of ended the ability to do that as well. I've talked about that with guests before, where
Right.
you know before social media, a senator could go back and work with somebody from the opposite party, right, and nobody would be the wiser. The media would cover it up or expose it
Mm-hmm.
as their narrative saw fit. But for the most part, it just happened in the background. Now we
Mm-hmm.
have this freedom of access. We can go and look up who signed on and who co-sponsored a bill. And
Mm-hmm.
with the demonization of the president that the media has done, if his opponents go back to their districts after they worked with him on something, they're not going to be welcome back in their districts anymore.
Right.
They'll get run out of town with tiki torches and oh wait, that's the wrong side.
Well, you've got to decide if you're going to make your campaign and your professional life about Twitter, or you're going to make it about accomplishing something. And hopefully, they realize that Twitter is a public place. So if you're publicly calling someone out, then you can't work with them one-on-one so easily anymore. So maybe you shouldn't be on Twitter. Maybe you shouldn't make official tweets on a whim that aren't decided by more than one person. And maybe you shouldn't mudsling on Twitter, if it comes back to haunt you. And I don't like to mudsling. I don't do that. I only put out evidence-based facts. And if I'm going to mention that someone did a horrible job, it's because I have the proof that they did a horrible job. And it's not personal. Why should I make it personal? It's not personal against Donald Trump. If he made a mistake, I'm going to point it out.
Yeah, and that's absolutely where we need to be. But the bases on both sides are in a frenzy.
Mm-hmm.
We all know the fact that the far left right now has given up and turned into atheists who worship the government as God.
Mm-hmm.
And the MAGA faithful crowd, MAGA has become a religion at this point itself. So,
Right.
Both of them are looking at their side and saying one is God and the other one is the devil.
Mm-hmm.
What happens? That's part of the
I'm going to
gridlock.
be the eye of the hurricane.
Yeah.
That's what I want to be. I want to be calm in the storm and talk to anybody on a one-on-one basis and listen to them and try to have mutual respect and understanding and cooperation to accomplish things.
Which, that's absolutely right. And I wish more people thought like that, to be completely honest. Don't get me wrong, I like the gridlock because a federal government that doesn't do anything is the kind of federal government that I want to be living under.
Right.
But to the extent of it, we could be using this time to repeal laws and relegate things more back to the state, and we can't do that either.
Right.
We can't make new laws, but we can't get rid of ones that belong at a lower level either.
Right. Yeah, I think we need to get more constitutional candidates. I don't care what party they're from.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a Republican, Democrat, Green, or Libertarian, or constitutional. Anybody could espouse the Constitution. It's already the predominant superseding law in America. It supersedes any other law, so it is the law.
Mm-hmm.
So you should have knowledge of the Constitution, and then liberty and mutual understanding go further than politics. They involve a societal ethic. So it's ethic for living in a society is to have mutual respect and understanding. So
yes, but you also have to consider we're fighting against the fact that Michael Che went on Saturday Night Live and said that the Constitution was like that old relative that's barely hanging on to life. Maybe it's time for him to just pass away and move along, which is an eerie thought on many levels, especially given the fact that the Democrats are trying to take healthcare over. But
Well, no, personally, Saturday Night Live involves politics. I don't find it funny, even if they're going after Donald Trump. I
yeah,
just, why involve politics in comedy? I don't get it. So,
now let's talk about Biden because he can't stop putting his own foot in his mouth.
mm,
So Biden was at a conference. He was talking about his proposed agenda for the presidency, and he made a fatal slip. And I mean, you know that if Donald Trump had said this exact same thing, we'd been talking about it for 6 weeks. But because it's
mm,
Biden, the only people who are going to really be talking about it are independent content creators like myself.
mm,
But Biden got on stage and he said that all kids have equal opportunities, and sometimes poor kids are just as bright and as talented as white kids.
right.
Then he walked it back and he said wealthy right away. He corrected his slip. But the fact that it's out
Mm,
there, the soundbite is out there, and
hmm
once again, it's the double standard of the media and the fact that we would not have stopped hearing about this if, let's say, Ted Cruz had said, well, Ted Cruz is Hispanic. That's a poor
mm,
example, but if Lindsey Graham had said something like that, we'd still be hearing about it.
right.
Wall to wall
I
coverage.
think I think that Biden doesn't really believe that statement, and he doesn't really have any passion for it. That's why he was easily going to mess it up and have to go back, and he couldn't control the moment or swing it in any certain way. He just had to correct it and move on because he's pretty blasé. He's a career politician.
Hmm.
He what new ideas does he bring to the table? None. It's basically he's the same as he's been for 20 years. So what new is he going to bring as presidency? I don't think anything that anybody considers revolutionary at all.
Yeah, I mean, when I look back at it in '08, because I used to be a pretty reliable Democrat voter. I grew up in a union house. It was what I was taught from a young age. It's what I believed was right. But I read Barack Obama's agenda in 2008, and I can't vote for this. This is like
Mm,
the antithesis of liberty.
mm,
And that was the sanitized version that I was putting out to get elected. And I saw the crumbling of liberty under that.
right.
And one of the things that I wanted to do, because I wasn't ready to get on the McCain train yet, was I wanted to write Biden in on the top because he
Mm,
was that blah union Democrat, that
mm,
neoliberal that could have got elected, and it wouldn't have changed
mm,
the status quo too much.
right. Maybe it'd be like another Bill Clinton light and
Yeah,
just let the economy do what it's doing instead of socializing it, ruining it. I
yeah,
can see that.
absolutely. But that's one of the things that's hinging the fact that he's at the top of the polls right now still is the
Mm,
fact that he is the old reliable union Democrat and he's
mm.
electable. The end goal is
I
to
think
try and get the evil orange man who
mm,
sidestepped the
right.
system out of office.
Right. I think basically people who are voting for Biden want to hear nothing from Washington and want it to be nice and peaceful and go through 2 to 4 years and not have to worry about anything. Maybe more. But we're in a different age now. We're in this total social media barrage and constant news cycle. Whereas during Bill Clinton, there wasn't a press conference every single day, and you could go weeks on end and not hear anything from the White House. And Bill Clinton was kind of a peaceful presidency for 8 years. Um, does that change the reality of today? No, not really. I don't think you can just go back to something like Bill Clinton.
Not hear anything out of Washington. That's the dream.
Yeah, that'd be great if the cogs actually work, but we know they're either going to be too authoritarian, going to get into our lives too much, or on the socialist side, they're going to want to overtax us and take our livelihood away and involve themselves in our lives in that way. So yeah, we've got two two big government wings, the left and the right. Two big government wings, the Republican Party and the Democrat Party in Washington, based in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And there needs to be a response and a check and balance to that. And it can be the American people. It can be voting out incumbents. It can be voting in liberty-minded people. It can be Libertarian Party. It can be people who are outsiders. But there's answers out there. We just have to pursue them.
Well, when I get to the end of 2020, there's 3 questions that I always ask my guest every time. So we've looked at the stats. We've seen the polling now. So my first question is for you, and this is going to be interesting from somebody who's actually run for president before. Out of the clown car of the Democrat Party, which candidate statistically right now do you think makes it to the end and becomes the nominee?
I think it'll depend on the very first primary, and I don't know. I would say that maybe Bernie stands a good chance of being the one that everybody thinks is the most reliable right now.
Okay. So this is always an interesting topic because I get a lot of conservative guests on here, and this always challenges their ideas. If one of the candidates, this is a what-if situation, if one of the candidates that's running for president as a Democrat right now had to beat the Donald and become the president, which one do you think would make the best one? Which is the lesser of 25 evils to you as president?
Yeah, I guess you would hope for somebody who's not going to get anything accomplished, and hopefully a Republican Congress in response, where either it was Bernie or Biden, that they could just outvote any veto and or not outvote any veto, but more just grind against each other and lock up. So I would hope that many liberty candidates run no matter what. So no matter who's the president, we can have a voice of liberty. Okay. So I guess that would be my final answer. We need more liberty candidates. So whoever that is, we'll be okay as a country for the next 10 years.
Okay. And lastly, now I know that you're hoping to get on the debate stage yourself here, but if we go back to a debate stage of just one-on-one, just one Democrat, one Republican, for pure entertainment value, no would you rathers or no statistics involved, which candidate do you want to see debating the Donald come the end of next year?
Oh, me, absolutely. Got to say that.
I mean, out of the Democrats, which one do you think is going to be the funniest one to go up against the guy?
That'll all be annihilated. I just don't. I don't see any of them strong against Donald right now. I don't have faith in any of them. So, zero. None of the above.
I still want to see Bernie because I want to see the two New York accents throw insults back and forth at each other.
Right.
I got a little bit of an East Coast state of mind going on there.
Cool.
All right. Let's talk about McConnell. Now, Mitch McConnell had a fall, broke his arm. He's recovering at home right now. He had polio when he was younger. I didn't know he had polio when he was younger. This is something that just kind of came out to me, but he's at home nursing an injury. It's August recess. The guy's 70. He deserves a little bit of time at home. But protesters decided that they wanted to gather outside of his house because he didn't want to bring a gun control measure to the floor of the Senate. And this has spawned a nickname for McConnell of Massacre Mitch, and has spawned some very violent calls for his death or dismemberment due to the fact that he doesn't want to discuss a bill that is not going to pass his chamber of Congress. What have you seen on this news story so far?
I would say, well, there's a watch list from an incident. You know, people threatening someone's death after a massacre. They're probably going to be investigated. So that wasn't wise of them. I don't see anybody threatening violence solving anything. I base liberty and whether something's just or not on the non-aggression principle. So it's not Mitch McConnell who pulled the trigger. It's not Donald Trump who pulled the trigger. There were shooters that did that action,
Hmm.
and you can't say that anybody contributed unless they told them to do it. Maybe if there was a white supremacist ring, I mean, and then you found some other people who were egging them on. That's probably something that needs to be investigated. Just like Dylan Roof was on different chat or services, that had other white supremacists encouraging him.
Hmm.
Not saying that that can't happen, but it wasn't Donald Trump and it wasn't Mitch McConnell, so I don't see blaming them being very, very productive.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the radicalization part, that's an interesting point to bring up when you talk about it because, I mean, wasn't it Bill O'Reilly a few years ago that was saying that 4chan and 8chans are repositories of left wing thinking and left wing evil? And now we hear 4chan and all we hear is right wing weaponized autism.
Mm, right.
And 8chan is even worse. I went on 8chan once.
Mm.
I got scared and left.
Yeah. I mean, they're anonymous posts, but yeah, I mean, you could definitely find something that's encouraging that kind of behavior on something like that. I don't know. I don't have the evidence myself, but if something was encouraging that behavior, then those people, that should be shut down and they should be investigated. You know.
Well, the authorities don't necessarily want to see 8chan shut down because it's very easy for them to go on and find
Right.
these radical posts and find these people who
Right.
are being radical about all the things that they're going to do because they feel they can do it openly, and the
Hmm.
FBI can get in there, and that's one place where they can see it all.
Right.
Which I'm on the fence about that completely. I mean,
Mm.
yeah, I don't want a place where the FBI can go and investigate private citizens, but yet if we take that away from the people who are
Hmm.
radicalized, we'll see 16chan pretty soon. They'll just go
Well,
deeper underground.
hopefully they don't accidentally radicalize someone, pretending to be a radicalizer. But yeah, they're keeping our First Amendment rights by having the website still up, and also at least reading every post if they're anonymous public posts about something like that. Yeah, they should be reading them.
And what do you think about people who would, go and gather outside of the home of an elderly man who looks
Mm-hmm.
like a peaceful, happy little turtle and
Mm-hmm.
would call for threats of violence for him on national TV? That was what blew my mind. The fact that
Right.
they said it to a camera and they put it on TV. If I was a producer, I would have started firing editors for that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's all down to who's directly responsible for the shootings, and that's the shooters. And blaming Mitch McConnell is just a waste of time, and they're wasting their time doing that and risking their own lives and livelihood. They're taking risks that have consequences. So,
Do they have livelihoods? I mean, other than getting paid to protest.
well, if they want to spend their time in jail, they can do that. There's easy ways to get yourself in jail.
Yeah, look at Epstein.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like I've got just a couple of little quick hitters here that I want to hit before we get out of here. I know we're running a little long already, but
Okay.
let's talk about this chicken processing plant in Mississippi.
Hmm.
So it looks like ICE went through and raided a meat processing plant down in Mississippi. They were able to take dozens, I think it was over 100 illegal immigrants into custody because of their immigration status. Of course, they went through the system, and many of them were released because of catch and release. That's something we talked about when I talked to the Deplorable Batcave before, and I didn't realize until just maybe a couple hours ago. But let's talk about the idea that this isn't actually going on, because I've worked for a place that I know for a fact this was going on. Everybody who worked there knew it was going on, but yet so many people on the left have spent, especially the pro-immigration types, have spent all their time trying to say that this never goes on and this this doesn't happen.
Mhm.
Do you see any of that down south? Well, this is Mississippi, so this is obviously down south. But do you
Yeah,
see any of this over by where you're at?
yeah, definitely in the construction industries, and I would say we need to shore up the welfare program to not allow immigrants who are not citizens to get welfare. And yet, on our Social Security website right now, it encourages, even if you're not a citizen, to get a Social Security number, free housing, free medical care, uh, food stamps. You cannot be denied food stamps. You can get a Social Security number. You can get affordable housing if you're not a citizen. And we're encouraging people to come over in here and live free. If we don't stop those, then there's just going to be a constant stream of people living off our welfare. And what we need is workers' visas that have photo IDs. And if you are on a workers' visa, you can work, you can earn a living, but you can't get all that welfare. We're going to have to stop the draw for people coming into the country illegally.
Well, you're running for president under a libertarian ticket here, so I got to ask. I've had Jen the Libertarian on the show before, and we talked about the border situation. Jen is a very open borders libertarian, but she assured me that there are more closed borders libertarians as well. Where do you stand on the idea of immigration, open borders, and illegal immigration?
I'm neither one really specifically. It's more in depth than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think a wall is useful. I think it's a waste of money. And if you're going to spend billions of dollars on it, you might as well shore up. And the first step is to shore up the welfare program, like I was talking about.
Yeah.
Which is the number one bleed, which is mostly the medical care that you're giving free Medicaid and Medicare to anybody who walks into the country. So basically, that's a huge strain. Anybody who walks in the country can get free medical care.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah, emergency rooms can't turn anybody away.
Right. Should they get continuous care with Medicaid? No. Right now, we give all immigrants Medicaid. So.
Well, when I asked the question, I wasn't so much concerned about the welfare aspect, but I'm glad that you brought that up because, I mean, that is a big draw for there, and we can stop some of the spending on the federal government, and that's always a good thing. But I want to take that back to this processing plant here and the fact that, you know, in places like that, factories are especially bad about it, but you've got the union workers who work for the union and demand the higher wage, and then a lot of them do, especially in the food service factories, will bring in that over-the-border labor to, you know, try and cut their costs a little bit here and there. And one of the calls that I heard on this story when I was hearing about it was the fact that a lot of people now want to try and hold this chicken processing plant accountable as well. They want the fines to go to the proprietors of that particular plant. And having worked in a plant, and I won't name them obviously because they were actually quite good to me while I was there, but I worked on the fleet for a plant that was doing the same thing, and I know they were doing it. Everybody there knew that they were doing that, and I mean, do we hold the employers responsible? Do we give them punitive measures? Do we punish them for it?
We need to enforce the laws in the books, and we need to have a better workers' visa program so you can't, you know, under the table pay somebody below minimum wage. And if we had a more regularized workers visa and a photo ID on it, and that was the one. And also right now other countries can issue the workers visa, so they're not the same standard, they're not the same issue. So I don't think they should be paid lower than minimum wage, and I don't think that they should be here without a worker's visa, so they shouldn't have been allowed to work there, period, at that location.
And the mentality, of course, is if you pay them below minimum wage, who are they going to complain to? If they go to try and complain to somebody in the government, they're deported.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, that was totally illegal immigration issue, and they should have been deported, and nobody should have been able to employ illegal immigrants. Definitely. And if we take away the welfare, that is offered to all illegal immigrants, that's offered to illegal immigrants, then if we have some way of distinguishing between an illegal immigrant and a workers visa person for welfare, which is blocked right now, then we could encourage being a citizen more than we encourage being an illegal alien. Right now, it's the opposite.
Or even a legal alien, for that matter.
Yeah. A worker's visa or legal.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and yeah, the reports for this factory were saying the fact that they had several social security numbers floating around that didn't have people matched to them, and they had 4 or 5 different social security numbers matched to each one of the people that were in there that they were being rated to. So there were some slippery practices that were going on in this place regardless. And I mean, to go back to the place that I worked, again, will not be named, but I knew a guy that was over in the production factory. I worked on the fleet, but knew somebody that was over on the production side that told me that, well, he had a coworker that was on his same line that disappeared one day and then came back but introduced himself by a completely different name. It's clearly the same person, but
yeah.
So this happens. We can't deny the fact that this happens.
Right. No, definitely. There are already penalties. We need to enforce the laws in the books. There's already penalties for employers for that, and but we do have a big problem with giving welfare to anybody who sets foot in the country. And if we reformed immigration, we wouldn't need a wall, as far as I'm concerned, and we wouldn't have to have closed borders or open borders. We would have regulated borders is what we need. That's what I'm for, regulated borders.
One of the last things I want to bring up on this topic is the fact where the narrative went. Because the first thing that the mainstream media tried to spin this into when they started covering this story, and they were all too eager to cover this story, even though under most circumstances it wouldn't fit with their narrative, is the fact that because these migrants were being detained, arrested for being here illegally and not having their papers, they were, and I quote, being separated from their children. And this goes back to what we heard in the Homan hearing, because this is what happens to criminals in this country. Whether it's somebody who's driving drunk with a child in a car, or a domestic abuser that's beating up his wife. When Homan went as a police officer and arrested somebody like that, that man was separated from his children. That's what we do with criminals in this country. But that's the narrative now that they want to spin and want to try and get sympathy for these migrants.
I think that there are some bad conditions in some of these, but it's not Trump's fault. I mean, this has been going on for years. You could go back to Bill Clinton and you'd probably find poor condition in migrant camps. I know that was going on in Miami. I saw it myself. So a migrant camp can have bad conditions, and we need to do something about that. But you know, the issue that you're talking about, I don't think applies, and that's what the law is. So they're basically calling for the laws not to be followed. Basically,
well, yeah, they're trying to yank the same narrative that they're using for the migrant camps to try and do this to people who are far away from the migrant camps.
Right.
So yeah, it's just a single line narrative, but of course now that wouldn't that same consideration wouldn't go to somebody who was beating the crap out of his wife.
Right.
They would say that he needs to be separated from his family as fast as he possibly could.
I mean, if you have a living situation where at any time you can go to jail for being an illegal immigrant, you're already putting your child at risk.
Absolutely.
The child is at risk and needs to go into foster care if the person does not have citizenship where they're at illegally. So there's an issue there that needs to be taken care of, and the child needs to go into foster care.
Well, as I mentioned before, most of these migrants are already out of jail right now because of the catch and release laws that we had on the books. So we'll see who shows up for their court dates, and maybe some of these people will go through the proper paperwork. I mean, I couldn't work like that if I was stressed about the fact that I could turn around, especially if it's already happened, and have a hand on my shoulder and, oh, now I'm going to jail. How do you work? How do you live like that?
Right, and hopefully they find that factory, because they'll just do it again if they're not fined. I mean, they may even if they are fined, if it's not harsh enough, they may try it again. So,
All right, let's talk about The Hunt. Universal Studios had greenlit and already actually recorded a project that was going to be a mainstream theater release, which is part of the reason I don't go to the theater anymore, depicting a large amount of liberal elites who were kidnapping red state deplorables, putting them in a camp and hunting them down. Now, there are reports, and nobody's seen the movie, whether or not anybody's going to see the movie or not. All we've seen is the trailer for this right now, but there are a lot of reports out there that's saying that the red state deplorables are going to be the protagonists somehow, which, coming out of Hollywood, I don't necessarily see how that's going to happen, but
no, it didn't sound
I can't judge it until I see it. The start of this, the fall from grace for this was that immediately after the shootings that we saw last week, ESPN decided that they were going to pull the commercial from its rotation. And suddenly there was a lot more backlash going on about this, and this movie is now pulled from release. It's in post-production right now. They're getting the editing done, but now it is not going to hit theaters. So what do you think of a concept like this?
I think that the interview, I saw the interview, direct a video about attempted assassination against Kim Jong-un. And it was a joke. It was a comedy. So this was probably so embarrassing that if it had been released, they would be sued. And that's what they're doing, is protecting their liability. That's why they didn't release it. So you could watch the movie and it could be horrible. It's not going to kill anybody if they saw the movie. But yeah, it's probably so embarrassing and so bad that they would get sued, or sued for defamation or something like that, or blamed for putting out such a horrible movie. So they are saving face by not releasing it. So that's their decision.
Well, I mean, I was originally worried when I heard about that this was going to amp up the narrative, that this was going to lead to people starting to get shot, because, we didn't, at that point, we hadn't heard the fact that this possibly could have had the deplorables be the protagonists.
Yeah, I'm glad it didn't escalate.
Yeah, the narrative is escalating already.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go ahead and make it okay by Hollywood standards to go out and hunt down deplorables.
Right.
So I think this whole thing was in bad taste. I mean, you can't stop somebody's freedom of speech, but at some point you maybe got to write that letter and say, hey, could you maybe not? This might not be a good idea.
It probably wouldn't have made any money, and it would have been, so embarrassing and a money loss for them that, it would have looked horrible for them. So if it had both been totally horrible movie and everybody hated it and it made no money, then they're saving face by not releasing it. Totally their choice.
Well, and the concept, I think, would have actually made a pretty good horror movie or a slasher movie or something like that. But you would want to put different factions in place, I think, especially in today's political
something
climate.
Fictional. That's
absolutely.
Not fictional. Yeah, I totally agree there. It's like bringing politics into comedy.
And we're back to Saturday Night Live.
Right, you're not being inventive there. You're not being creative. What you're doing is you're falling for the same tropes that people accuse Trump of doing, which is slinging mud, getting emotional, making it all about yourself. And the Democrats fall for it every time. They're pretty much mirroring his style, and it doesn't work. They're trying to be nasty, and they are not putting any ammunition when they are nasty, and it fails. So that's the kind of concept of that movie. Really, is we're gonna just twist reality and make fun of somebody we want to make fun of, and well, it went back to bite them. So they'd use too much reality.
Make fun of somebody they want to make fun of too, and that's an interesting point to bring this up as we close this out. Is the fact that all of the The characters that they were putting in, they were, from what I understand, to be very stereotypical middle of the
Hmm.
country redneck megaites.
Hmm.
So I mean, they were putting on a caricature for this, but
Right.
still, I don't know. It was in bad taste in my eyes, and I'm going to talk
Hmm.
about it in my solo video on Friday too.
Hmm.
But yeah, I who greenlights something like that?
Yeah, really. It's a waste of time and money.
Who is sitting back in an office chair at Universal Studios and saying, you know what, I want to make a movie that's going to alienate half the country?
It sounds like a B or C or D movie, really. It sounds
Yeah,
like something that would be done, but not in the theaters, you
yeah,
know?
it's something you'd see at Sundance or something.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's all that I have today. But the last thing we always do on Ed's World, because we talk about so many negative topics like liberal elites hunting down deplorable conservatives here, is I always try to end on a positive note. So tell us a little bit about a hobby that you have that helps you unwind that has nothing to do with work or politics. It could be a movie that you just checked out, a video game you've been playing, a book you've been reading, or just it's something that helps you unwind after the grind of dealing with this back and forth in
Mhm.
Washington, D.C. all the time.
Yeah, I saw that you were going to ask that, and I was very interested to tell you that I wrote an RPG book called Necrotopia Handbook to the Apocalypse. And I've written the entire rule book, commissioned artists, and it's actually on Amazon. And I have created an entire universe that has biblical and otherworldly apocalypses. So it's a role playing game like Dungeons and Dragons, and you can pretty much create any kind of character you can think of, mystical, magical, or whatever, and try to survive the apocalypse. So it's a post-apocalyptic survival RPG game, tabletop.
What was the apocalypse, if you don't mind me asking?
The first one is Satan invading Earth, first invading Las Vegas and raining down all kinds of demons and imps and goblins and zombies. And you have to escape Las Vegas from the demonic invasion.
And that is going to be, I'm going to look that up as soon as I'm out of here, and that's going to be
Cool.
linked in the description below.
Yep.
Remember, thanks for watching this show, and if you want to continue the conversation with me on anything that we've talked about, you can email me, edsblogtwitter@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter. That is at edsblogtwitter with a 1 in place of the I. And if you'd like to finish the conversation with my guest, Keenan, tell us where they can find you.
Yes, my Twitter handle is K Dunham for peace, but just look up Keenan Wallace Dunham on Google and you'll find my website, my presidential website, dunham2020.nationbuilder.com, my Twitter. I don't have a YouTube right now, so you're going to see old videos of 2016, but I do have, this will be my fourth interview. So those interviews are on YouTube. Just look up Keenan Wallace Dunham and you'll find all the information about me.
I think this is going to be the third one for our media group, too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that'll all once again be conveniently linked right down there below. And while you're going down into that description, if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like button if you like what you saw. That helps us move up the algorithms and tell YouTube what people should be watching. And word of mouth is the best for this kind of thing anyway. As I've been noticing, I'm shadow banned on YouTube again. So head on over to BitChute or try and boost me back on YouTube. But try and get this video out there. And if you are listening back to this on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play, thank you again. If you're on iTunes, go ahead and hit that 5-star rating and a good review. Just like on YouTube, that helps us move up the algorithms and build an audience for this channel. As I mentioned before, this is a Freedom Scoop Media Group production. Keenan has been on all three of the Freedom Scoop shows. So go over to Freedom Scoop, check all of that out. Check over the great podcasts by The Generational Gap and by Stephen Ignoramus. And go over there, check out some of the articles that we all have written over there. And as before, if you know somebody that's interested in writing for a good media-minded company, a freedom-minded company, or you yourself are interested in writing, shoot me a line. We'll get you set up with a sample article and we will see if we can get you published. As we always say on this show, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Keenan, you have last word.
Thank you very much for having me. It was awesome discussion. I think I learned a lot, and I'm glad you gave me the platform to put some of my stuff out there too. Thanks.
Thank you, and take care, everyone.